The Unexpected Legacy. The Truth Behind the Maid's Inheritance. The Prologue. The Matriarch's Last Wish. Imagine a living room. Not just any room, but the grand salon of the Beaumont estate. A bastion of elegance and tradition that stood, majestic and somewhat austere, in the heart of one of the most exclusive communities in Palm Beach, Florida. Its large windows, overlooking the sparkling ocean, seemed to reflect the light of a golden age, but the air inside, on that sunny afternoon, was heavy. Not with the salty sea breeze, but with tension, expectation, and newly settled grief. Eleanor Beaumont, the matriarch, had passed. A woman whose life was a complex tapestry of philanthropy and control, of love and a calculated coldness. She built her fortune from a family inheritance and expanded it with shrewd investments, becoming a respected figure in society. Her death, though expected after a long and dignified battle with illness, did not bring peace, but rather a feverish anticipation, the anticipation of the reading of the will. Eleanor Beaumont was no ordinary grandmother. She was a force of nature, a woman of rigid principles and a gaze that could unravel any lie. Her fortune was vast, but her family relationships were, to say the least, complicated. She had 2 grandchildren, each with their own hopes and fears regarding the inheritance. Julian, the eldest, an ambitious and charismatic businessman who dedicated his life to pleasing his grandmother, dreaming of taking control of the Beaumont Empire. And Sophia, the youngest, a free-spirited artist with a generous heart who had distanced herself from the family years ago, tired of the superficiality and obsession with money that permeated the Beaumont estate. She sought an authentic life, dedicated to art and community, far from her grandmother's suffocating shadow. That afternoon, Julian and Sophia were gathered in the mansion's grand salon, along with Mr. Arthur Jenkins, the family lawyer, a man of grave countenance and monotonous voice who held in his hands a leather-bound document, the last will and testament of Eleanor Beaumont. The reading had been brief, and the result mostly predictable. Large sums to charities, some properties to longtime employees. But then Mr. Jenkins paused. A pause that was far too long. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the family with an expression they had never seen before. "And finally," he began, his voice a little lower, "Mrs. Beaumont has left the entirety of her remaining fortune, including the Beaumont estate and all its properties, to—" The silence in the room was almost deafening. Julian and Sophia looked at each other, expectation in their eyes. They awaited their names, the confirmation of their inheritance, but the name that followed was neither of theirs. "To Mrs. Maria Rodriguez, her housekeeper." The shock was seismic. Julian and Sophia, who moments before had been beaming about their inheritance, turned pale. Their eyes widened in disbelief, then in fury. Maria Rodriguez, the maid, the one who cleaned their bathrooms and served their meals? It was an insult, an affront, a tasteless joke. But what no one knew, what not even the lawyer knew, was that Eleanor Beaumont had left one last secret. A secret that, if revealed, would not only justify her decision, but would make the family weep with regret. Get ready, because this is the story of how the grandmother left her entire inheritance to the maid, and the reason behind it made the family cry with regret. The heirs and the maid. Worlds colliding. To understand the magnitude of Eleanor's decision and her family's reaction, it is essential to delve into the lives of the heirs and the woman who received the unexpected legacy. Julian Beaumont. The eldest, Julian, was the personification of ambition and charisma. From childhood, he was shaped to take over his grandmother's empire. Eleanor trained him rigorously, instilling in him the belief that power and wealth were the only indicators of success. Julian absorbed this lesson with fervor. He sacrificed his youth, his relationships, and even his own happiness for the sake of the family business. He was a ruthless negotiator, a cold strategist, and a man who saw the world in terms of gains and losses. For Julian, the inheritance was not just money, it was the validation of his life, the crown he believed he had earned. He saw Sophia as irresponsible, a dreamer who had abandoned her family responsibilities in pursuit of utopian ideals. The idea of Maria, the maid, receiving the inheritance was a personal affront, a devaluation of all his effort and his lineage. Sophia Beaumont. The youngest, Sophia, was Julian's polar opposite. She possessed an artistic sensitivity and an innate aversion to the corporate world. From an early age, Sophia felt suffocated by the cold, calculating atmosphere of the Beaumont estate. She found refuge in painting, music, and volunteering in underserved communities. Her passion was to create, not to accumulate. Eleanor saw her as a disappointment, a granddaughter who refused to follow the path laid out for her. Sophia, in turn, saw her grandmother as a woman trapped by her own wealth, incapable of experiencing true joy or human connection. She had moved away from the family years ago, seeking an authentic and meaningful life, far from the suffocating shadow of the Beaumont Empire. For Sophia, the inheritance was a burden, a source of guilt and discomfort. She wished only for enough to fund her social and artistic projects, and the idea of fighting over money disgusted her. She saw Julian as a man blinded by greed, unable to see the value of life beyond numbers. Maria Rodriguez. Maria had been the housekeeper at the Beaumont estate for over 30 years. She had come to the United States as an immigrant, seeking a better life for her family. She started as a cleaner and, with her dedication and loyalty, became the head of the household, the silent shadow who observed everything. Maria was a woman of few words but great wisdom and compassion. She cared for Eleanor in the last years of her life, when the family was too busy with their own interests. She listened to Eleanor's stories, her laments, her regrets. She was the only one who saw the matriarch not as the powerful Eleanor Beaumont, but as an elderly, lonely, and vulnerable woman. Maria never sought recognition or wealth. Her only desire was to provide for her family and live a dignified life. The news of the inheritance left her in shock, a mixture of disbelief and a subtle fear of what it would mean for her simple life. Eleanor's will, leaving everything to Maria, was a blow to Julian and Sophia. For Julian, it was a betrayal, a denial of his worth and sacrifice. For Sophia, it was a cruel irony, forcing her to confront the world she had tried to leave behind. The dispute over the inheritance was not just about money. It was about years of resentment, of unmet expectations, of divergent paths that had turned them into strangers under the same roof. Mr. Jenkins, the lawyer, had tried to mediate, but the rift between the grandchildren and the maid was too deep to be filled by words. They were trapped in a cycle of accusations and defenses, each convinced of their own righteousness, unable to see the other's perspective. The mansion, which should have been a home, had become a battlefield, and Eleanor's will, the ammunition. The family's fury, accusations, and desperation. The news of Maria Rodriguez's inheritance spread like wildfire. The Palm Beach elite was in an uproar. How could the Beaumont matriarch, one of society's most respected figures, have done something so outrageous? The phones at the Beaumont estate rang off the hook, and local newspapers ran sensational headlines. Julian and Sophia, humiliated and furious, confronted Maria. "This is absurd," Julian bellowed, his face red with anger. "You manipulated my grandmother. You took advantage of her frailty." Sophia, though less aggressive, felt equally betrayed. "Maria, how could you? Grandma would never do this." Maria, with her usual calm, just shook her head. "I did nothing, Mr. Julian. Mrs. Beaumont was a very strong woman. No one manipulated her." Her words, spoken with simplicity, only fueled the grandchildren's fury. They accused her of theft, of blackmail, of anything that could disqualify her. Mr. Jenkins, the lawyer, tried to intervene, explaining that the will was legally sound, signed and witnessed by notaries and doctors who attested to Eleanor's full mental capacity. Julian, with his sharp business mind, began to plot a legal strategy to contest the will. He hired the most expensive lawyers, searching for any loophole, any mistake that could nullify his grandmother's wishes. Sophia, though reluctant to engage in a legal battle, felt pressured by her family and society. She still loved her grandmother, but Eleanor's decision felt like a slap in the face, a denial of her own worth. Meanwhile, Maria felt lost. The inheritance, which should have been a blessing, had become a burden. She didn't want the Beaumont estate, nor the fortune. She just wanted her simple life back. But she also felt a deep loyalty to Eleanor, a silent promise to honor her last wish. She knew there was a reason behind Eleanor's decision, a reason the family didn't understand. And that reason, she knew, was hidden somewhere in the mansion, waiting to be discovered. Julian and Sophia, blinded by anger and greed, were determined to expose Maria. They tore through the mansion, looking for any evidence of manipulation, any sign that Maria had taken advantage of Eleanor. They rummaged through their grandmother's belongings, her diaries, her letters, but found nothing. With each passing day, their frustration grew, and the rift between them and their grandmother's memory deepened. They were so focused on proving Maria wrong that they couldn't see the truth that was right in front of their eyes. The secret diary. A window into Eleanor's soul. Amidst the family's fury and desperation, Sophia, in a quiet moment, found a small diary hidden under the loose floorboards in her grandmother's room. It wasn't Eleanor's official diary, the one she kept to record social events and appointments. This was a personal journal, with a worn leather cover and yellowed pages, filled with Eleanor's elegant handwriting. It was the diary of her final years, a record of her most intimate thoughts, her fears, her regrets, and most importantly, her true relationship with Maria. Sophia began to read, and every word was a revelation. Eleanor had felt increasingly isolated in the last years of her life. Julian was too busy with his business, and Sophia had drifted away. The mansion, once full of life, had become a lonely place. Her society friends, though present at events, were superficial, concerned only with status and appearances. The only person who was truly by her side, who listened without judgment, who cared for her with affection and dedication, was Maria. The diary revealed that Maria was not just a maid. She was Eleanor's confidant, her friend, her family. Maria was there when Eleanor was sick, when her own grandchildren were absent. Maria helped her dress, eat, take her medicine. Maria listened to her stories, her laments about life, her regrets over past choices. Maria was the one who saw her as a person, not as the Beaumont matriarch, but as an elderly, frail, and lonely woman. Eleanor wrote about her disappointment with her grandchildren, not for their lack of ambition, but for their lack of compassion. Julian was obsessed with the fortune, Sophia with her art, and both had forgotten what truly mattered: love, human connection. She realized that despite all her wealth, she was dying alone, surrounded by luxury but devoid of genuine affection. And Maria, the humble woman she had hired years ago, was the only one who offered her that. The diary also revealed an even deeper secret. Eleanor had made a terrible mistake in her youth, a mistake that had haunted her for her entire life. She had given up a child, born out of wedlock to protect the Beaumont family's reputation. This child, she discovered years later, had died young, without ever knowing his mother. The regret over this decision consumed her. And Maria, with her kindness and her own story of family sacrifice, had become a symbol of redemption for Eleanor, a way to atone for her past sins. The inheritance for Maria was not just an act of gratitude, it was an act of love, a plea for forgiveness, and a final lesson for her family. Sophia, with tears in her eyes, realized the truth. The inheritance wasn't about money, but about love, loyalty, and regret. She ran to Julian, the diary in her hands, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "Julian, you have to read this. We were wrong, completely wrong." The truth revealed: repentance and remorse. Julian, initially skeptical, took the diary from Sophia. He began to read, and with every page his face contorted in a mixture of shock, disbelief, and finally, a deep and painful regret. His grandmother's words, written with such sincerity and pain, dismantled his facade of ambition and coldness. He saw Eleanor's loneliness, her disappointment in her own grandchildren, and Maria's unwavering devotion. But the final blow came with the revelation of the abandoned child. Julian, who had always prided himself on the Beaumont lineage, discovered that his grandmother had carried such a devastating secret, a secret that had consumed her for her entire life. He realized that greed and the pursuit of status had blinded his family to Eleanor's true essence, to the pain she carried, and to the love she desperately sought. He saw himself and Sophia reflected in his grandmother's words, obsessed with their own lives, neglecting the woman who loved them in her own way. The tears came. Not tears of anger or frustration, but tears of remorse, of shame, and of a deep sorrow for the loss of a connection they could have had. Sophia, beside Julian, cried too, not just for her grandmother, but for Maria, the woman they had unjustly accused, the woman who had been Eleanor's true family in her final years. They went to Maria, who was sitting in her simple room, packing an old photo of Eleanor. Julian, his voice choked with emotion, asked for forgiveness. "Maria, we were blind. We were cruel. We didn't see what was right in front of our eyes. Grandma loved you, and we failed her." Sophia hugged Maria, tears streaming down both their faces. Maria, with her innate kindness, just nodded, understanding their pain. The regret was palpable. The inheritance, which was once a symbol of greed, had become a mirror, reflecting back at them the ugliness of their own souls. They realized that true wealth was not in money, but in love, compassion, and human connection. And they had lost all of it, while Maria, the maid, had won Eleanor's heart. Redemption. Honoring Eleanor's legacy. With the truth exposed and regret in their hearts, Julian and Sophia decided to honor Eleanor Beaumont's true legacy. They did not contest the will. Instead, they approached Maria with a proposal. They knew Maria didn't want the Beaumont estate, nor the fortune. She wanted her simple life back. So, they proposed a partnership. Maria accepted the Beaumont estate, but on one condition: it would be transformed into a community center, a haven for immigrants and families in need, a place where the kindness and compassion Eleanor had shown Maria could flourish. Julian and Sophia, with their share of the inheritance, created a foundation in Eleanor Beaumont's name, dedicated to supporting research on rare diseases in honor of Eleanor's abandoned child, and funding art and education programs for underprivileged youth in honor of Sophia's passion and Eleanor's desire to atone for her past sins. Julian, the ruthless businessman, began to use his skills for good, managing the foundation and ensuring that resources were used ethically and transparently. He became an advocate for corporate social responsibility, seeking redemption for his own past greed. Sophia, the artist, dedicated her time and talent to the community center, teaching art and inspiring young people, finding a new purpose in her life. Maria, while still maintaining her simple life, became the honorary director of the community center, her wisdom and compassion guiding the foundation's actions. She was the bridge between the past and the future, the guardian of Eleanor's true legacy. The Beaumont estate, once a symbol of coldness and greed, was transformed into a beacon of hope and compassion, a testament to the power of redemption and unconditional love. The impact. A new family. The story of Eleanor Beaumont's inheritance spread, not as a scandal, but as an inspiration. The media, which had once reveled in the family's drama, now told the story of redemption, of transformation. The Beaumont family, which seemed destined for ruin by greed, found a new path, paved by understanding and love. Julian and Sophia, once distant and in conflict, became inseparable, united by a common purpose and a renewed love for their grandmother and for Maria. They learned that true family is not defined by blood or wealth, but by the bonds of affection, respect, and compassion. Maria, who never had a wealthy family, found one in Julian and Sophia, who treated her not as a maid, but as a mother figure, a mentor, a friend. The community center at the Beaumont estate flourished, becoming a model for other communities. People from all walks of life came to learn, to heal, to find hope. The memory of Eleanor Beaumont, which was once associated with wealth and control, was now synonymous with kindness, compassion, and a legacy of love that transcended social and financial barriers. Julian and Sophia, instead of inheriting a fortune, inherited something far more valuable: the ability to love, to forgive, and to make a difference in the world. They learned that true repentance is not just feeling sorry, but acting to right the wrongs of the past and build a better future. The lasting legacy. Eleanor's lesson. Eleanor Beaumont's lesson resonated for generations. Her decision to leave the inheritance to Maria was not an act of whim, but an act of deep love and a final lesson for her family. She knew that money by itself would not bring happiness or unity. She wanted her grandchildren to see what she had learned too late: that true wealth lies in human connections, in compassion, and in the ability to love unconditionally. Eleanor's diary, which Sophia had found, became a precious document, read and reread by the family and by those seeking inspiration. It revealed Eleanor's complexity, her mistakes, her regrets, but also her deep wisdom and her desire for redemption. The story of the abandoned child, which was once a painful secret, became a reminder of the importance of forgiveness and acceptance. Julian and Sophia, now respected leaders in their communities, told the story of their grandmother and Maria, not with shame, but with pride. They had learned the most important lesson of their lives, and they were determined to pass it on. The Beaumont estate, with its doors open to all, became a symbol of hope, a place where differences were celebrated and where love prevailed over greed. The family's regret, which was initially one of anger and humiliation, transformed into a regret of gratitude. They were grateful that Eleanor had given them this lesson, that she had shown them the true path. They were grateful for Maria, who, with her kindness, had been the catalyst for their transformation. And they were grateful to have found a new kind of family, a family built on love and compassion, not on blood or wealth. The epilogue. A new dawn. The Beaumont estate, once a symbol of coldness and greed, now radiated a new energy. Eleanor's rose garden, which she and Maria used to tend together, bloomed more vibrantly than ever, a silent testament to the love that had grown between them. The laughter of children, from all backgrounds and social classes, echoed through the halls, a sound Eleanor had never heard in her lifetime, but which somehow she knew she would approve of. Julian, with his strategic mind, and Sophia, with her humanitarian vision, transformed Eleanor's legacy into something much greater than any fortune. They built a network of community centers and foundations, inspired by the model of the Beaumont estate, spreading the message of compassion and service. Maria, while maintaining her simple life, became a legendary figure, an inspiration to many, her story told and retold as an example of the power of kindness. And so, the story of the inheritance that almost destroyed them became a legend about how love and understanding can overcome greed and resentment. What they found in the will was not gold or jewels, but a lesson, a redemption, and an unbreakable bond that united them forever. The truth, however much it hurts, sets you free. And in the case of the Beaumonts, it also united them, transforming regret into gratitude. If you know a family story that was divided by secrets but united by the truth, or if you yourself have found an unexpected bond in your life, share your experience in the comments. We believe every story has the power to inspire and transform. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will surprise you and make you reflect on the true meaning of family, legacy, and the unshakable power of love.